I did the movie because I read the script and I couldn't sleep that night. And I woke up in the morning after a few hours of restless sleep and I thought, I gotta read it again. And I read it again, I thought, it's really freaking me out, so I think I have to do it. It's about these medical students who come up with a serum that they hope can temporarily bring people back from the dead while they're in the middle of surgery. You know, the idea is more practical than it actually turns out to be, but it all goes terribly wrong and I end up being the big problem. Because we didn't have a huge amount of resources, we were shooting everything with real effects makeup or, with lighting effects. So it wasn't that there was a huge amount of post-production done on the movie. So what you're seeing in the film is actually what we were seeing on a day-to-day basis. So like, the lights would be out and then suddenly they'd turn on and I was hanging from the ceiling like a bat. Or the lights would be flickering and I'm moving all around the room, jumping and scaring people. And I have these crazy lenses in my eyes that make them black orbs. So, because of the practical effects, it was scarier to shoot. For instance, there was a scene where I look in a mirror and it kind of explodes. It cracks in my face, and that actually happened on the day, which is a pretty freaky thing to shoot. So I think for all those reasons, it was just kind of a fun and weird experience and definitely a little creepy. We had this great director, David Gelb, who made Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which was one of my favorite documentaries. And he just brought his unique sensibility to this film. And I think he's a really exciting new voice in the filmmaking world. This cast was so awesome, just sensational, talented people from all different types of acting backgrounds. We had Mark Duplass of Mumblecore fame, who is a great director and producer himself and has acted in everything from The League on Fox to the one I love, the great independent romantic film he made with Elizabeth Moss last year. I'm such a fan of his, so I was really excited to work with Mark. And we have Donald Glover, also known as Childish Gambino in his music life, and he's on Community, of course. He's a really funny comedian, and it was great to have his comedic presence on set, and I think brought a whole other kind of layer of character quirkiness to the film. And then we have Evan Peters from American Horror Story and several other movies, and he's just fantastic. And he was more familiar with the horror genre than the rest of us, but he just has this awesome imagination, and he's just really an interesting actor. And Sarah Bolger, sweet Sarah Bolger, who's Irish, and I adore her. And she was just fantastic. And I loved that this was a horror film where the women were not the dumb characters running away from danger. They were the antithesis of that. I was the dangerous element, and Sarah was the smart character who figures out how to take me down, or at least tries. I love the horror genre. I think it's really fun, and I think for actors it's a blast because you get to just go wild. You get to just have fun, and particularly if you're playing the villain, I think it's probably the most fun part of it. But an actor's goal is to make the audience feel something, and the horror genre is a really direct way to make people feel something immediately. And yes, you're manipulating people's worst emotions and giving them nightmares, but in a way, that is kind of the fun of performing. And so I had a blast with it, and I've always loved psychological thrillers and horror films, and this is the type of horror film I like because it's not all blood and guts. It's a little bit more creepy on a psychological level, and that's just what I feel like watching, so it's also what I feel like making. It's not so much blood and guts, it's more kind of psychological thriller, kind of playing into your worst nightmares. So it's freaky, but I think it's kind of smart freaky. I think these movies are really fun to see in a group. They're really fun to see in a crowd. The response is always really kind of fun and wild. The consequences of these characters playing God is really that they are experimenting with something they don't quite understand. So they create this serum hoping they can use it to save lives in a really positive way. And instead, they use it on someone who has a very traumatic past and a lot of repressed negative issues. And the serum just activates those issues in a really dangerous way. So I think, they are well-meaning scientists, and yet they unlock something really, really dangerous. I think the big question this film is asking is, what happens when we die? Where do we go? And if science keeps evolving to prolong life or to bring us back from the dead, what will that mean? And are we ready for that? I think The Shining is still the most terrifying movie ever made, and I watch it every time it comes on. And I'm fascinated by everything that went into the production of the film and what the experience was like for those actors. I mean, talk about freaky. They shot that movie for an entire year. So ours was a piece of cake compared to The Shining. But I have always been a fan of the genre, and I think our film harkens back to more 70s type horror films. It's not as much based on blood and guts or any special effects. It's a little more kind of lo-fi and a little more psychologically creepy, and that's my kind of thing.